I didn't believe till the end that I would say it out loud. We did it. In May, I shared with you my idea about a grand cooperative project with my audience, Travnik, and more than 200 people supported the idea back then. The point was that I wanted to create a big book with my viewers' illustrations. Everyone who wanted to take part in the project posted their works on Instagram, and that's how I selected 17 participants. I took into consideration only the works, and if I liked one, I looked at the profile and made myself sure that the person is really an artist, because there were cases which made me doubt, like, was it really the art of the person who had posted it? Next, I made a chat in Vkontakte with all the participants and started packing the envelopes. It took quite a lot of time, and particularly because I had to coffee dye all the sheets of paper. Yep, in total I made 44 A4 sheets of paper, plus some of the ruined ones. Next, I had to make out the text about all the plants and print them out. The point was that I planned to stitch the sheets by stacking them in 4, that's why I couldn't make the alphabetical order. I had to make everything so accurately, how to place everything, on which sheet, on which side to place an image, and where it's better to print the text. I made a scheme, or I should say a plan, where it is shown on which side should everything be, for me to be able to stitch everything in the right order. And on this very sheet, I split the images between the participants. Everyone had 4 illustrations, and some of the participants took 2 more illustrations. To sum up, I was gradually dyeing the sheets in coffee, typing and sending all these. It was really important to me to make the guys feel that I wasn't just using their job, that they weren't just working on me. That's why I wanted them to plunge into the atmosphere, to make everything beautiful for them, to make them feel they were really the participants of the project. So I put some tiny notes and all sorts of nice little things into the envelopes. And when they reached their destinations, my fairies and elves got down to their work, which was beyond my control, and I could only wait. Well, actually, no. I made some illustrations by myself, but it wasn't that easy for me. And when all the envelopes were returned to me, I opened Instagram and I don't really remember why, but I wanted to see who had been sending their requests of taking part in Travnik, and I saw this work and immediately thought, why I hadn't invited this girl to Travnik? And then I invited her. So there were 18 participants. 18 envelopes I was opening with my pounding heart and glee, looking at the illustrations. And only when all the works were returned to me, I saw the total number of pages, because I'd been gradually printing and sending them. Then, the responsibility shifted back to me, and I had to arrange all the pages into Travnik. In summer, I brought this piece of bark of the fallen tree from the forest. While it was drying, I painted the carton into gold, in case it would be seen through the bark, and then glued the carton to it. Then I thought that it would make everything robust, plus it helped me to attach 2 parts of the bark. Next, I started cutting to achieve the right shape, and, you know, even if bark looks decrepit, if it is dry, it might be really hard. And to protect it from crumbling and falling apart, I covered it with a layer of glue. To my mind, in this case, it will perform its protecting function better than varnish. Next, I had to make the title on the cover. I wanted shiny and golden letters, and eventually, I succeeded in it. For the inscription, I used one of my favorite fonts, and somehow, I had to make this 3D effect of the letters. I tried sculpting them, but my attempt wasn't successful at all. So I just cut out all the letters and made an even piece of clay. I had neither pasta machine nor acrylic roller, so I tested all the possible means. Finally, I managed to make the clay even, and then I put a piece of paper on it and started to push the paper using a ball tool. Just don't ask me how this idea appeared in my head. I don't know. And that's how I made the contour of the letters. Well, the letter K didn't fit, so I had to make it separately. And I baked it as it was. But I didn't want to damage the letters, because sculpting them was a real torture, so I started to finally cut them out only after the baking. And then, following the technique used in the video with the acorn, I started to cover the letters with gel top and left it to dry. Finally, out of these glossy letters, I made a silicone mold. Yeah, I really tired myself out making the letters, but I managed to create what I wanted. I will pour the mold, as you have already guessed, with the epoxy resin. I decided not to color it, but to add a lot of gold and mixed glitter. It is this very case when the result coincides with the expectations, gold magical letters, just as I wanted them to be. Using the stencil, I was trying to glue them, but they wouldn't stick well, and making the holes for them into the bark was too dangerous. At the same time, planning the design of the cover, I was thinking about making a rectangular frame around the letters, but I didn't find the way to do so, to make it look good, and this problem of the attaching the letters led me to the idea. I can use the moss of a stump. I started to glue it to the letters, and it was the right choice to do so using hot glue. I could easily put it under the letters into the cracks of the bark and push through some moss, making some kind of a pillow under the letters. And they started to stick very well. And I also glued a bit of moss to some different parts of the bark. Using a dry brush, I covered uneven parts of the bark with gold paint to highlight them. More gold and more magic! The same things, I mean gluing and cutting, I did with one more piece of bark from the same tree. Next, I had the following question: how to attach these to huge barks? I thought of making the spine using leatherette, but I needed a lasting base under the spine to protect the letters of becoming crumpled because of the bark while closing and opening the book. And then it came into my mind that once my friend sent me a photo of wooden notebooks where the cover and the spine were wooden as well. It impressed me so much the way they were able to bend, so I remembered it well and recalled it just in time. It was magic that I managed to find the file on the internet to make such a notebook, and the workshop to helped me to cut this all out of plywood, so thank you very much. Laser cutting is actually one more curious opportunity for art, so I think I will make a separate video about it, especially taking into account that the founders of this company turned out to be really creative. And here I am, holding a veneer sheet which can bend. Can you imagine? It bends! I didn't want to believe till I grabbed it that it would be possible. I painted the part which will be seen using the stain for wood. I do love its color and the effect which it creates. While everything was drying, I took the sheets. Before stitching them, I decided to decorate the first sheet using the stamps, in case something went wrong, to be able to remake it. Stamps are amazing! Just have a look at all these sheets one more time. And I have to stack them on 4 according to my scheme. Then I started to stitch all these piles of sheets. Next, I had to stitch the piles together. I took a piece of leatherette for this. Unfortunately, it was a bit smaller than the size I needed. And I started to stitch my piles as close as possible to each other. Just like this. I think I will also make a separate video about stitching the sheets. Then I glued the leatherette with the sheets to the wooden base. And after that, I could finally put everything together, the sheets and the cover. But I had to do it very carefully to avoid problems with the opening of travnik because of the bark. So, first I glued the front part of the cover, and then the back one. The only problem was in the thickness of the sandwich, maybe even if these hefty cracks. But the epoxy resin of my childhood was just on the way to help me. Its name is gypsum plus glue. By the way, it would be really nice to make some pretty things out of this. Too many plans. I mixed gypsum with glue in a 1:1 ratio, and using this mixture, I covered all the cracks in the cover, and when it was dry, I painted it. And now we may say that it's done. But I decided to decorate the pages a bit more. It was really informative to work on this travnik. At first, the list of the plants for travnik I copied from the group is to translate the abode of the forest witch. Just to remind you, I don't consider myself as a witch, I just enjoy this whole atmosphere. Well, here was printing the pages and suddenly glanced at the letter M, a mandrake, okay? Besides the real plants, there will be some magical plants as well. As a result, it turns out that this plant really exists in our nature, and I thought these were all just the tales of anti-rolling. There was a slight problem with a flower called labaznik in Russian, because in the list I had written labaznik and tavalga, but they turned out to be the same plant, a meadowsweet in English. And maybe you heard about dushitsa, but did you know that you can find this herb in almost any house? The answer is simple, we just call it oregano, but in Russian there is such a beautiful word. There were also some difficulties with cowslip and primula. In fact, cowslip is primula, but in Russian, primula is a different plant, completely different. I was making the text according to the following scheme: some basic information, where it grows, how to use and what for. And I really enjoyed finding accidentally and adding mythical stories or even magical properties. even if I would never use them. And having read all these texts while making them, having looked at all these pictures of flowers, because I had to send them to the participants to avoid any confusion, I just opened a whole new world for me. I started to look at all these from another angle. I started to gaze at the plants in summer. How splendid and various the scenery around us is. This project also showed me one more important thing. Art has no boundaries, no sex, no age. I have almost randomly just united these 18 people from 12 to 27 years old, from 18 cities, from different parts of Russia and Ukraine, Belarus and Kyrgyzia. I express my gratitude to all the participants and to those who supported this project, posting their works. In my Instagram, you'll find more photos of Travnik. And I also call on you to support the participants with your subscription, because without them, it wouldn't be possible to create this Travnik. And yeah, in future I'm planning one more similar project where many more people will be able to take part. I hope I've managed to inspire you, and I love you this much. Bye!